Just a little bit of background about myself. I'm the CEO and founder of Bugwolf. We started Bugwolf 2.5 years ago. And last 10 years prior to that, I spent most of my time as a tech biz dev guy. And prior to that, I was actually a designer, working both in Melbourne and the UK. In that time, I've been building tech startups, testing new markets, and running product and engineering teams around the globe. Bugwolf, like I said, was started 2.5 years ago. We're essentially de-risk digital products, and it helps organisations accelerate the speed in which they deliver those products to market. And we're very complementary of any other existing processes. So we're very much focused around the human element of testing, where sometimes automation can be difficult or cost prohibitive. Today I'm going to talk about what I've been able to witness over the last 2.5 years after speaking with lots of different customers, and essentially what keeps a lot of those customers awake these days from a quality perspective. I'll talk a little bit about how I believe the cloud has put a lot of pressure on quality in terms of the speed, and also how organisations can take the Bugwolf model and apply that inside their organisations. So 3 key things I think have been very stand out as I've started talking to more and more customers, and that is, without a doubt, many organisations are going through significant digital transformation, and they're doing that on the hunt for increased productivity and to deliver more innovation. With this change, what we're seeing is customer engagement moving from what was tightly managed by a large group of employees being put into the hands of customers. Risk, which traditionally was handled internally, is now being put out into a thin slate of glass, and that's putting a lot of pressure on organisations and shifting risk around. And with that pressure comes a greater need for better quality products. The slightest interruption in terms of digital assets these days can lead to wreaking havoc amongst customers, and I'll talk about some data that we've discovered in that space as well. So software bugs aren't new. Technology's been failing us for years. What's changed and what keeps customers awake at night? Well, firstly, the cost of testing and defects is going through the roof. It was actually reported that a defect in production for many large enterprises costs around $14,000 to fix. Obviously, that number can change depending on who we're talking about, but the cost of fixing defects in production is rising. The other side to it is speed. Cloud's accelerated every environment, and that's put a lot of pressure on quality. No longer can organisations be shipping every month or every quarter. Organisations now are starting to ship in real time to remain competitive, and that's putting pressure on businesses as well. Fragmentation is a mess, and it's creating a lot of pain for customers. If you look at Android devices alone, there are over hundreds of different devices and operating systems, and that can be a real headache for organisations to manage. And mobile users are actually 5 times more engaged than any other technology platform. So the slightest interruption in terms of performance can mean a world of pain for businesses. In fact, Amazon reported that it would cost them around about $1.6 billion in revenue if their website took longer than a second to load. Accessible. Social media is a lot more accessible than any other support channel. So no longer do we have a single support line to call. There's over 600 million people sitting on Twitter, not only sharing what they had for lunch, but also sharing their brand and their digital experiences. And the constant change is also a challenge for a lot of customers. If you look at OS is updating every quarter, browsers updating monthly, and we can only imagine that's going to get even more aggressive. That makes it very, very difficult for organisations to be able to manage, and especially when it comes to automation. As soon as there's a significant high rate of change in the digital space, the cost of automation can be outweighed by the benefits of automation can be outweighed by the cost and the time it takes to actually manage those processes. And that's another challenge. And then finally, as the world becomes more freelance, there was a report issued that said 40% of the US population would be freelance beyond 2020. The contingent workforce piece comes into play as well. It's becoming harder for organisations to attract key talent as this change takes place. So what are the real costs? Now these costs aren't hardware related. I can buy hardware 5 nodes of availability for $10 a day and scale up and down when I need it. These examples are actually related to software glitches and software bugs. An organisation lost $440 million in 30 minutes in the US due to a software glitch. That's what it cost a company after they were fined due to a software glitch in a financial system. It actually cost investors $217 million. They thankfully got all their money back, but the organisation behind it was fined $25 million. Online retailers are losing $44.6 billion a year in online transactions, and that's in the US alone, due to problems around transactional systems and various other things. And as the world becomes more and more connected, we will start to see a lot more of this happening. Let's hope that, as we also become connected, we also can start to make more updates over the wire. But car recalls, especially in recent times, have become a significant challenge for organisations. And a lot of these issues that are coming out are software related. That's a scary knock on the door, 22 people arrested due to a software glitch. And $9 billion in unprocessed payments, Japanese bank. Everyone was paid their salaries, but it took a few days to process. So over 2.5 years ago, as I started to recognise some of these challenges in the market, I decided to, we started Bugwolf, and we decided to actually use crowdsourcing as a way of being able to address some of those challenges. The results were immediate, but what we also realised was there was a lot of inefficiencies with crowdsourcing that sometimes impacted the return that we expected to see. So day one, we actually started a pilot. We actually ran a number of pilots in the early days of Bugwolf, and we went out to market over a number of weeks. I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks. We assembled a large crowd of testers from right around the world. We found a customer that was willing to actually give us a crack, and we ran a number of pilots with a number of customers. And although the results were nice and fast and we got a lot of defects back, there was a number of things that we needed to address to make it more consumable for enterprises. One of the things we noticed was, even though there was pockets of talent throughout the crowd, we were failing to attract some of the best testers. So we put aside some time and actually spent a lot of time speaking to some of the best software testers in the world to really understand what was motivating them and why they weren't participating. And one of the things we worked out was, early on, they were very interested and excited about the concept of crowdsourcing and competing, but the high-paid software testers had a lot more to risk for a potentially smaller return. The quality, so we received hundreds of defects. We ran this first couple of pilots over 4 or 5 days, but the actual quality was a challenge for us. It took us a lot of time and resources to actually work through those defects. And pull out the false positives and the duplicates and various other things. So that was one of the things we also learned. Time, it took a significant amount of time. We ran the cycle for 4 days. The time to actually go through all the defects and check false positives and duplicates and various other things started to outweigh the benefits that we originally set out to achieve. And as we started to talk to more and more enterprises, they told us they loved the idea of crowdsourcing, but they had concerns about unknowns accessing their intellectual property. And that wasn't just a problem faced by large enterprise, that's also a challenge for some of the small businesses as well, especially if they've got a new product just before they release it to market. And finally, as those larger organisations started to engage with us more and work with their different departments, there was a number of hurdles that we needed to actually go through with security, risk and compliance to actually make it more consumable for a large enterprise. So as I mentioned before, Bugwolf de-risk digital products. We are a SaaS platform which addresses all those inefficiencies that we talked about earlier, both in the market and also from a crowdsourcing perspective. And we're also a fully vetted marketplace of some of the best elite testers in the world. In terms of what we do, we're essentially combining crowdsourcing and gamification, those two models, and creating some magic in the middle. Inside of that is a fully vetted marketplace. So we spend days every month going through applicants, scouting testers around the world and building this concept of an elite team and putting them through vetting and a probity process. In terms of where we fit, we're not in the automation space. There's a lot of awesome companies out there doing that. We actually play in that space where human beings, not robots, are really important in the process. So it can be very difficult and very expensive to automate a customer experience. There are tools out there, but when you consider a high rate of change in the front end of an application, that can be very challenging. So we're essentially focused on this area here, where we cross over into the functional testing space a little bit, a lot, and we sort of work our way backwards through customer pilots and various other things. We're assembling elite testers. They're full probity checked and vetted, and they come from different parts of the world, and we're actually able to select those based on the geography of your customers. They're competing. This is where the game element comes into place. So they're incentivized and rewarded to find some of the best defects they can within a test cycle. And we're incentivizing the teams to essentially look for usability, user experience, functionality, and various other defects. And we can also be very narrow around what we do during a cycle. We're a utility or an on-demand service. Customers can wheel us up and down whenever they choose. There's no lengthy contracts, and we're not about putting bums on seats inside organisations. We're essentially about providing an on-demand service that can be utilised when and if needed. One of the things that I realised early on as I started talking to more large enterprises was there was a lack of being able to quantify the return that was being invested in testing. So one of the cool things that we did by working with a lot of our customers is developed an ROI model. So at the end of every engagement, we actually provide our customers not only detailed reports around what we've discovered, but we also provide a measurable model whereby they can justify their spend with our organisation. We're attracting some of the best talent around, so we're not constrained by geographic borders. Some of these testers actually do work for other large organisations, and that gives us the flexibility to be able to source people from lots of different locations and not be constrained by their physical location. And they're fully vetted. So with a lot of the large enterprises, we actually put the testers through full onboarding. They onboard almost like an employee would. Back-to-back NDAs, probity, various other things. And then we also have a layer on top of that where the platform is able to measure their performance and do various other things. So yeah, after working with hundreds of customers, through this product development stage early on and essentially talking to a lot of testers, we've continued to deliver significant results for our customers. We take a traditional manual test cycle, which in some cases could take 3 to 4 weeks, down to a couple of days. That allows customers to spend more time on addressing quality and getting products out to market faster. The other thing we do is, some customers early on that we spoke to were spending significant amounts of money managing device labs. So we reduce the expense around having to set up device labs and manage those. We make sure that a lot of our testers have a set number of devices, and we get across a lot of different types of devices and browsers during a cycle. Now this can vary depending on how small, how large the customer. In some of the large customers we actually save them more than this, and some of the smaller guys it's significantly less. But on average we see up to about 50% cost saving on the manual exploratory testing process. And just a few weeks back, few months, we actually recorded that number there as an ROI return for our customers, one of our customers. That was a number that, in terms of defects, we actually discovered that with a small team over a 24-hour period. I think one of the facts that we're most proud of, we helped an organisation release a product close to 2 to 3 weeks earlier than they originally planned. So if we put that in context of an organisation that relies heavily on revenue or various other things, that can not only lead to awesome customer experiences, but also potential revenue gains as well.